Hello, researchers! Welcome to this channel, where we discover the history of the oldest people in the world, the Slavic one. So far we have seen that according to Jordanes the Goths are a Scythian people, a people with royal power and with a clearly expressed cult of the hero. We also saw that according to Jordanes the Getic are an ancient people. And one more extremely important thing, we saw that they have their own language, a Scythian language. In order to continue our research on the Getica, it is necessary to clarify one key point. In Jordanes Getica there is no strict chronology. He speaks about one event, then moves on to another event from a different time period, after which he returns back and begins a third event in a third temporal horizon. This clearly shows that Jordanes disposes of many different sources, which he combines in his narrative. It also becomes clear that according to Jordanes the Goths have three main places of habitation, around the river Vistula, in Moesia, Thrace, and Dacia. And as a third habitation, in the lands north of the Black Sea. The following picture emerges. Jordanes' narrative begins with Philomer. But all the peoples whom he describes around the Goths during their habitation near the Vistula are peoples of the new era. When, however, Jordanes begins to speak about the second habitation, in Moesia, Dacia, and Thrace, he is already moving in times before Christ. When he moves to the third habitation, north of the Black Sea, he again narrates events from another temporal layer. This is seen most clearly when Jordanes begins to speak about the battle between Caucasus and Vessosus. After the end of this narrative, an event dated around 1177 BC, he suddenly inserts a narrative about the Amazons. The Amazons, however, are dated significantly earlier than the era of the Sea Peoples. These events rather belong to another campaign toward Egypt, that of the Hyksos, around 1650 BC. Obviously, Jordanes interweaves two different events into one narrative. On the one hand, he places at the center the Sea Peoples, a large-scale migration of people, in which entire communities move together with women and children, and a real migration of peoples is observed. On the other hand, the invasion of the Hyksos has a completely different character, a campaign of a military elite, in which it is entirely possible that the fighting men left their women behind. It is precisely these women who are more likely to have become what the ancient tradition describes as Amazons. And the chronology of the Hyksos and the Amazons coincides, which further shows that Jordanes unites different temporal layers into one narrative. Therefore, the passages that we will examine are dated from around 1650 BC to the Trojan War. This gives us an even more ancient perspective on the Scythian people and their place in history. Next follows a quotation from the Getica. By lot Lampeto remained to guard the native borders, while Marpesia, taking with her an army of women, led a new kind of army into Asia and, conquering various peoples by war and reconciling others by peace, reached the Caucasus. There she stayed for some time and gave her name to the place, the rock of Marpesia, about which Virgil also says, as if hard flint, or stands the Marpesian rock. It was precisely in this place that Alexander the Great later erected gates called the Caspian Gates, which today the people of the Lazy guard as a Roman fortification. There the Amazons dwelled for some time and grew strong. From there, after crossing the river Aales, which flows near the city of Gargara, they conquered with equal success Armenia, Syria, Cilicia, Galatia, Pisidia, and all the plains of Asia. They turned also toward Ionia and Aeolia, which they made subject provinces. Having ruled there for a long time, they founded cities and camps bearing their names. In Ephesus they also erected the Temple of Diana with lavish riches and wondrous beauty, because of their skill in archery and hunting, to which they had devoted themselves. Thus the women born in Scythia, by the will of fate, conquered the Asian kingdoms and held them for almost 100 years, and then returned to their kinsfolk at the Marpesian rocks, which we mentioned above, namely in the Caucasian mountain. Next follows a commentary. In this passage Jordanes tells us about the path of the Amazons and about the fact that they left traces in the form of toponyms, temples, and cities in the lands they conquered. The territories which he lists as conquered by the Amazons are designated with geographical names contemporary to Jordanes, and not with the names of the peoples and kingdoms that existed in Asia Minor, Syria, and Armenia at the time of the events themselves. This shows that Jordanes uses concepts understandable to his reader in order to describe a much more ancient reality. Important for us here is the chronological position of the narrative. According to Jordanes, the Amazons ruled Asia Minor for approximately 100 years, after which they withdrew back to the Caucasus. Jordanes' narrative allows us to arrange the events in a clear chronological line. Around 1650 BC, the Amazon community takes shape, which for almost 100 years rules parts of Asia Minor, Syria, and Armenia. The end of this dominion coincides with the rise of the Hittite Kingdom around 1550 BC, when the Amazons retreat toward the Caucasus. Next follows a quotation from the Getica. And they, fearing that their offspring might diminish, sought intercourse with the surrounding peoples, arranging a market once a year, under the condition that in the future, returning every year on the same day, everything that bore male offspring should be handed over to the father, while everything that was born female the mother should train for the military art, or, as some think, the boys who were born were handed over to a miserable death out of a stepmother's hatred. Thus among them the bearing of children was something abhorrent, although everywhere it is considered a blessing. This cruelty accumulated for them the greatest fear in common opinion. For what hope, I ask, would a captive have there, where even toward a son it was considered a crime to show mercy? Against them, as is related, Heracles waged war and subdued them almost more by cunning than by force. And Theseus carried off Hippolyta as booty, from whom he begot Hippolytus. And these Amazons later had as queen Penthesilea, for whom there are the clearest testimonies from the Trojan War. For it is said that these women held power up to the time of Alexander the Great. Next follows a commentary. In this passage from the Getica, Jordanes acquaints us with the way in which these warrior women managed to maintain their military community for hundreds of years. It becomes clear that the children of the female sex were raised and trained entirely for the military art. In this model there is no place for agriculture and animal husbandry. This is not an ordinary society, but a combat-oriented, closed community, existing solely through war. It is precisely this that explains how, from deep antiquity, approximately from around 1650 BC, all the way to the time of Heracles and Theseus, the Amazons managed to keep this military community alive. It is important to note that Heracles and Theseus belong to the same Scythian tradition to which the Getae and the Amazons also belong. They are not external figures, but part of one and the same heroic and cultural circle. Finally, Jordanes notes that the Amazons also took part in the Trojan War, which shows how this narrative connects different epics into one long and uninterrupted tradition. Next follows a quotation from the Getica. But lest you should say, why, after we began to speak about the men of the Goths, do we linger so long among the women? Hear also of the renowned and praiseworthy valor of the men. The historian Dio, the most diligent investigator of antiquities, who gave his work the title Getica, and that the Getae are Goths, as we proved above. Orosius and Paul bear witness. Mentions that after a long time they had a king named Telephus. And so that no one may say that this name is entirely foreign to the Gothic language, let no one be surprised. Since it is customary for peoples to borrow names from one another, the Romans from the Macedonians, the Greci from the Romans, the Sarmatians from the Germans, and the Goths most often from the Huns. This Telephus, son of Heracles, born of Age and related by marriage to the sister of Priam, was indeed tall in stature, but even more terrible in his strength. Equaling his father's valor with his own virtues, he resembled Heracles also in bodily likeness. Therefore the ancestors called his kingdom Moesia. This region has on the east the mouths of the river Danube, on the south Macedonia, on the west Istria, and on the north the Danube itself. This king waged war with the Danons, in which he killed the Xander, the leader of the Danons, and while fiercely attacking Ajax and pursuing Odysseus, he fell from his horse, entangled by vines, and was wounded in the thigh by the spear of Achilles, and for a long time he could not be healed. Nevertheless, though already wounded, he drove the Danons out of his lands. After the death of Telephus, power was inherited by his son Eurypylus, born of the sister of Priam, the Phrygian king. He, driven by his love for Cassandra, wished to take part in the Trojan War in order to help his parents and father-in-law, but soon after his arrival he was killed. Next follows a commentary. In this passage Jordanes reinforces his claim that the Goths and the Getae are one and the same people. He then mentions King Telephus, the king of the Mysians, explicitly noting that he had lingered for a long time on the narrative about the women of the Goths and now turns to the narrative about the men. It is precisely here that Jordanes introduces Telephus and his father Heracles. The author explains that the mother of Telephus is Age, a priestess from Athens, and that his wife is the sister of Priam. This outlines a common Scythian area encompassing the Balkans and Asia Minor, in which marital ties, a common culture, and a common religious world exist. The same is confirmed by the fact that Theseus and Hippolyta, together with their son Hippolytus, also belong to this cultural circle. In this way Jordanes directly connects the Mysians and their royal power with the figure of Heracles. It is also important to note that Telephus wages war with the Danons before the Trojan War and emerges victorious from this conflict. Finally, Jordanes also mentions the grandson of Heracles, Eurypylus, who takes part in the Trojan War. Thus a picture emerges of two interconnected communities, woven into one common historical and heroic tradition. Jordanes' narrative allows us to arrange the events in a clear chronological line. Around 1650 BC the Amazon military community takes shape, which for almost 100 years rules parts of Asia Minor, Syria, and Armenia. The end of this dominion coincides with the rise and strengthening of the Hittite Kingdom around 1550 BC, when the Amazons retreat toward the Caucasus. After this transition Jordanes directs his attention to the men of the Scythians, introducing Heracles, and after him Telephus, the king of the Mysians. Telephus wages a successful war against the Danons before the Trojan War, and his son Eurypylus already belongs to the generation of the Trojan War, where this long process reaches its culmination. Thus Jordanes conveys to us not mythology, but a coherent historical memory of an ancient Scythian world, developing from deep antiquity to the end of the Bronze Age. Jordanes clearly shows us through marital ties that the population inhabiting the Balkans, Asia Minor, and the entire area around the Black Sea represents the primary zone from which the Scythian tribes spread. This is a common cultural and historical area in which the same clan and royal traditions operate. It is important to clarify that the Thraco-Pelasgian tribes south of the Balkan Mountains stand at the basis of the migration known as the movement of the Sea Peoples, while the Mysians north of the Balkan Mountains stand at the basis of the spreading to the north, toward the Vistula and the Oder. In this way we can see that today's Poles are descendants of the Mysians, and through them, also of Heracles, within the framework of this ancient Scythian tradition. Thank you, friends, for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your opinion in the comments.